In this episode of The Paint Show, we are finally looking at Undersea Green. What's up, Liron here. Thank you for joining me in another episode of The Paint Show. And today, as I mentioned, we will be looking at Undersea Green, which will help us finally complete the Daniel Smith secondary set bunch of reviews. I'm gonna put them all, I'm gonna put them all in a playlist together so you can check them out all together. Really love this set. I find that it's very economic. It's really a good one to have, I think. So let's get started. Basically, the Undersea Green is the one color that I really was impressed by when I got this set because it looks beautiful. It has some very interesting components and features, but I wasn't sure what I'm gonna do with it. It took me some time of getting used to it, and after a while of using it, I decided that what I'm gonna do just by experimenting is add some blues to it and some yellows to it and play around with it and create interesting greens. Now, another use that it has is if you want to have a painting that has maybe a dark atmosphere, not a lot of light, this is a great muted green to have because it's very grayed. It's not that bright, which is good. It's a good green to have as a base if you want to add some blues, some yellows to create some variety. Okay, so this is what this came to. This is the use that I came to when I started using that. Now, I want to read you the description on Daniel Smith's website, and it'll lead us to the next part that I want to talk about. So, an artist's favorite, this exciting medium to high staining green blends French Ultramarine with Quinacridone Gold. So basically it has French Ultramarine, Quinacridone Gold, and also Nickel Azo Yellow. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So basically what they say is the inorganic sedimentary French Ultramarine settles and granulates, while the organic transparent Quinacridone Gold floats into a golden halo. And this is what gives this one the interesting finish. Now, they recommend you apply it with Moonglow, Ultramarines, and Quinacridones to create a harmony, okay? And this is exactly what we're gonna do. So let's talk a bit about the components of this tube. So it's a 15 milliliter tube, came in this set with the other 15 milliliter tubes. It's a series 1, so it's a little cheaper than the Quinacridone Burnt Orange, for example. This one goes for about $10 on Amazon, link in the description box. Quinacridone Burnt Orange was about $17, I believe. So a bit about the pigments. So this one has 3 pigments in it. Ultramarine Blue, which is PB29. It has Quinacridone Gold. So it says Quinacridone Gold, but what's actually written here is PO48, which is Quinacridone Burnt Orange. So I don't know why the disconnect. It's very interesting. And finally, Nickel Azo Yellow, which is PY150. Now, even though they say Quinacridone Gold, let's assume this was a Quinacridone Gold in it. The Quinacridone Gold is discontinued, but I believe there will be a replacement, and I will put a link in the description box. PO49 is the one that's being discontinued, but the Quinacridone Gold, from what I saw, will be replaced by Quinacridone Burnt Orange, which is PO48, and the same Nickel Azo Yellow that's here, PY150. So the components of this one aren't going to change, even with the discontinuation of Quinacridone Gold. So just an interesting thing. I will put a link in the description box so you can see what I'm talking about. But this one has basically 3 pigments. This leads to the interesting texture. So it's not a single pigment one. It has excellent light fastness, rating 1 by Daniel Smith's standards, conforms to ASTM, D, all of that. It is medium to high staining. I believe I saw somewhere that it's medium, but they say in the description it's medium to high staining, granulating, as we mentioned. It's semi-transparent, so this one's a little more opaque than the Quinacridone Burnt Orange, which was transparent if I'm not mistaken. A very interesting color. So what we're gonna do, here's what I want us to do. First, we're gonna look at this one, swatch it out, show you the dry, wet on dry, wet and wet, some dry brush techniques. Then what I want us to do is show some mixes, so mainly with blues and yellows. I'm going to try doing a few interesting things with the blues. And then what we're going to do is try and remix it. Okay, so I will have to wing it in terms of the yellows. I don't have nickel as a yellow, but I think we can make it and get a quite similar result with this one. Okay, so if you're ready, let's change the angle and get started and look at the paint itself. Okay, so let me show you what this paint looks like on the palette. This is my, if you remember, I have this corner dedicated to the secondary set. So this is the green. I'm gonna apply some water to it to get it to wake up. It doesn't harden as much as I remembered actually, so it is quite soft rather quickly. It will take a bit of work to get it to become of a darker value. So anyway, what we're gonna do now, I'm gonna refocus the camera and we're gonna just zoom in and start filling up everything here. So you'll see what this looks like in different situations, different uses. So I just want to start out with a very basic wash, and first we're going to use a very wet mixture. I'm just adding some water to make it lighter, because I do want to have some gradation from light to dark. And I'm just going to start swatching this. I'm doing this standing up. Usually I sit down, but now I decided standing up will be more fun. And you can see already, if you look by the way at the palette, you can see the yellows and the blues separating it. It's going to be a little hard to see, but this area is much more yellow than this one. This one is a little more blue. And this is what makes this one so special in my opinion. So anyway, I'm going to just move on here. And notice how beautiful that is. Let me center it a bit. And what we're going to do, I'm going to fill it up. And then we will give it some time to dry so that we can look at the final result. It's going to separate on paper as well. It's going to be really, really cool. So now I'm using almost no water, so just the paint very highly concentrated. So we can see the full variation in value. And you see the drier it is, the more you get to see the strokes on this cold pressed paper. So we're gonna allow it some time to dry and come back and see the result, but just take a look at this. You see this blue stripe? This is exactly what happens here. It's too bad you can't really, I'll try and maybe take a picture with my phone and share it so you can better see what this looks like, but just beautiful. So next up I want us to do some wet and wet, and I'll thoroughly clean my brush because the previous time it had a bit of paint left on it. So let's see. Yeah, this is clear water. And I will just pre-wet the surface here. This is a 600 gram paper, so it's gonna drink up the water significantly, and this is the paper I use lately. So anyway, let's just start dropping in the paint here and notice the oranges even, or the yellows that are created here. So just very interesting. So I'm gonna start dabbing that in, and look how it spreads really nicely. I have a bit of a level here, so it should go a little down as well. So now let's just make it a little more concentrated. Start adding some darker spots here and there. And finally, I'll just grab some very, very dark paint and start putting that in. And check it out. This is going to create some very interesting granulations. I'm going to later on hyper zoom in so you can better see this. But anyway, when you do these kinds of wet and wets, you can go really dark even when you think you don't, because by definition the paint is going to become really, really wet just by touching the paper, and so it's going to dry a little lighter. Okay, so I think we're going to let that dry in the meantime, and next I want to look at some dry brush. Okay, so I'm just going to grab some dry paint here and try to put in some of these kinds of strokes in here, and you can see it has just a really nice, I think the texture works really well with the paper. This is a great brush to get some dry techniques, because when you hold it up like this, it has less contact with the paper and you can get some really cool effects, or you can even hold it up down like that and then pull, and you can see it's really an empty kind of stroke. So this is a really good one to try out. So next up we can start working on some mixes. So the first mix I want to try is adding some blues into that. So I'm just gonna grab some of the French Ultramarine here and add it to the mixture, and we're gonna tilt it more towards the blue. So here I have some French Ultramarine, and we're just gonna try and get something in the middle. So now we have this kind of a combination. So if I take back the pure green, we'll get something like this, okay? But once I'm gonna push it more towards the blue, this is what we get. This is a very interesting green, I think. I like that a lot. We're gonna increase now the volume on the blue and add a bit more blue to that. And I want to try out just to get it to be really dark and see what the result looks like. So I'm just grabbing a lot of green, a lot of blue, and really pushing it. And you can see a very interesting final result with that. I really like the way this looks. And I think what we're gonna do now, and this is what I was really waiting for, is to mix not French Ultramarine, which is already a part of this paint, but rather phthalo blue. Okay, so let me zoom in a bit. So let's go ahead and try that out. Try some phthalo blue. So I'm gonna start again with some green, and then I've got some phthalo blue here. And I want to see what they look like, even just next to one another. So this is kind of the result we get. Let me try and create a mixture of them both. You can even see what this looks like on the palette. So I'm just going to grab some of the phthalo, and this one gets dark really easily. And then some of the Undersea Green. So the green isn't really dominant with the blues. It feels like the blues dominated. And this is the final result. A little more towards the more lively green, I guess. I can imagine this one working really great for near the sand area of the beach. Which is really a nice discovery, actually. I have some empty space here. Let's use that. I'm just curious or we can just move onto the yellow area and just steal away from that a bit. So if I put it together like that, I'm really pleased with how it looks. I think this could actually really work well for beaches and maybe even swamps and things like this if I increase the ratio of the green here. So very interesting. Next up in this area, I want to try out some yellows just to see what this will look like. Because it's a green, I thought we'll just break it down to the components. So let's try it out. First, maybe with some lemon yellow that I got here. So I'm just going to wet it a bit. And we will start with the lemon yellow and just see where that takes us. So I'm putting a bit of yellow here. This one is relatively non-contaminated, so it's in a good shape. And then I'm going to just start adding a bit of the green to it, and we're gonna see what this looks like. So not that unexpected, it just looks kind of like a combination of the two, I guess. Let's try out doing the very same. By the way, sorry for moving the palette from place to place. I want to try out maybe some of the warmer New Gamboge. This one is a bit contaminated, so I'm gonna clean it up. And let's try and add some green to that. So I'm not really making this perfect or anything, that's fine. I really like this combination, kind of reminds me of a bit more towards the gold there in the middle. And I think the one thing I do want to try out is this with the Quinacridone Burnt Orange. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to just wet the well here, add a bit of water. And let's see what kind of a variation we get from this. So this is the Quinacridone Burnt Orange, pretty much in its purest form. I'm gonna clean the brush and let it mix on paper with the Undersea Green. And I worked with these together many times. And I like this combination, so I kind of know what to expect. Let's mix them a bit on the palette and see what it'll look like together. Kind of reminds me of the recommendation of Sap Green and the Quinacridone Burnt Orange or Burnt Sienna. Kind of the same thing, I'd say. All of these are nice combinations. I'm really pleasantly surprised by this one, the the phthalo blue. I had a good feeling about this one. I wasn't expecting it to look like that. So now I think we've come to the part of trying to remix this. So we're going to use this area and try to just recreate it using no Undersea Green. So to remix this one, we're going to use French Ultramarine. So I'm going to grab a bit of that. We're going to use French Ultramarine, we will use Quinacridone Burnt Orange, and then we will improvise with the yellow. So I'll probably use a combination of New Gamboge and lemon. So here we have the green. Let's grab some of that Quinacridone Burnt Orange. And already it gets us close, okay? So I'm going to just make this mixture a little wet. So I'm curious to see what this sums up to. So let's just try it out here. Let's add a bit of blue to that. Okay, so we're still pretty far off, but that's going to improve obviously when we add the yellow. So I'm just going to add a bit more of both the blue and the Quin Burnt Orange. And now it's time to add some yellow. I'm going to add both. So we have some New Gamboge here in the mixture, and we'll have some lemon yellow. The lemon yellow is really dominant. The moment I put it, it really made a difference. So now we have this very yellow-greeny mixture. So let's put that here. And now we're going to increase the ratio of blue. And I probably won't get the same result, but hopefully we can get something similar. So this one already gets a little close. I'm going to add a bit of water here, just so we can better see the result. So you see, not exactly the same, but definitely gets us somewhere there. I'm going to add a bit more of the orange. Perhaps that's missing. And we can just continue playing around with that. I wouldn't say it's a really similar result, but accidentally touched the phthalo blue. But it is somewhere in the ballpark. A bit more blue. The French Ultramarine really dries on the palette, takes some time to wake up. So I think this is the closest I'll get to the green. And if we compare it, it's actually not that far off. So you can see here, this is what we mixed. And with this one, if we compare it, or even with this one, sorry, you can't really see with this one. So they're kind of similar, not identical, but they are similar. So let me zoom out a bit and we'll talk about everything we did. Here are all the mixes we tried. I'm gonna zoom in just a moment and show you the granulations better, and actually everything. So we did some normal swatches with beautiful, beautiful patterns here. I'm gonna zoom in on them, you'll see. Here we have the wet in wet, we have some dry brush technique, some mixes. So here we have the French Ultramarine, phthalo blue, yellows, and finally our attempt to remix this. Okay, so let me grab the camera and hold it up really close to the paper so you can see all of the details. Okay, so here's everything up close. Now let me really get close to the paper here. And hopefully you can see, check out this pattern here. I just love it. You can see the texture of the paper, but also just the amount of details in the transition. I love that. So here we have some wet and wet, and you can really see how it separates. You can see here a little more blue at the bottom because they settle, and then the oranges or yellows stay on the top. Some of the dry brushes, strokes, sorry, that we did here. And the mixes. So we've got the Ultramarine, phthalo, and finally our attempt at remixing this. That I don't know how well it turned out, but it is kind of a remix. And here we have the tube itself. So in any case, I really hope you enjoyed this video and just seeing the final results and all of the mixes and different elements to it. Let's change the angle and wrap this one up. So this is it for today's episode of The Paint Show. This wraps up the Daniel Smith secondary set. I really hope you enjoyed this one. I will put everything consolidated into one playlist, as I mentioned, just so that we can you can have an easy access to them. Links to purchase these in the description box. These are affiliate links, meaning you pay the exact same price and I get a commission. So that works out nicely. And if you want to support me, that's a really good way of doing that. Again, I recommend if you purchase this, buy the whole set. It's just cheaper. The whole set goes for $24 and each individual tube is like $10, $17, so why waste that? What else? What else? Yeah, that's pretty much it. I really hope you enjoyed this one. This was episode 23. I will see you again in another episode of The Paint Show and also in another video really soon.